Time did not rush in the mansion after the confession. Days unfolded gently, quietly, like pages turned with care. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no sudden healing, only patience. And sometimes, patience is where love truly begins. Scene 1. A table set for two, but shared in silence. Grace came downstairs early as always. The morning light poured through the tall windows and dusted everything in soft gold. She began arranging the breakfast table, just as she always had. Except today, Ethan was already there. He was seated, not in his usual chair at the head of the table, but in a plain one at the side, the kind the staff used when the family wasn't looking. He stood when she entered. A small gesture, but it meant more than he knew. Ethan softly, "Good morning, Grace." "Grace, good morning." She set the plates down without looking directly at him. He didn't reach for the silver. He waited, not to be served but to see what she needed. "Grace, you can eat." Ethan shaking his head gently. "Not until you sit." Grace hesitated. Once, she would have thought it kindness. Now it felt like repentance. Quietly, she sat across from him. They ate in silence, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was quiet healing. And Ethan didn't look at her with longing. He looked at her with respect. Scene 2. Margaret's gentle wisdom. Margaret found Ethan later in the garden, pruning roses badly. Thorns had already pricked his hands more times than he could count. "Margaret, roses are patient, Ethan. They bloom slower than we want them to. They hurt us when we rush them." He paused, breath shaking. His voice broke on the truth inside her metaphor. "Ethan, I ruined everything, Mother." Margaret touched his shoulder. "Margaret, you didn't ruin God's plan. You just stopped trusting your own. That can be the beginning, not the end." He looked down, ashamed. "Ethan, she deserves someone better. Someone who didn't lie." Margaret smiled gently. "Margaret, son, we all come to God liars. It's who we choose to become afterward that matters." Ethan closed his eyes. A tear slid down, quiet and clean. "Ethan, then I will become someone worthy of her forgiveness." Margaret nodded. "Margaret, and not to win her back, but because it is right." Scene 3. Grace and the Old Bible. That evening, Grace sat in her small room, kneeling beside the bed. Beside her lay an old, tattered Bible, the only possession she had kept from her life on the streets. She opened to a page worn thin from past prayers. "Love is patient, love is kind. It keeps no record of wrongs." Her hands trembled. "Grace," whispered prayer, "Lord, I don't know how to love like that. Teach me to forgive without pretending to see him as you see him. Not as who he was, but who he is becoming." Tears fell quietly, not from pain, but from release. Scene 4. Ethan's first step of service. The next morning, Grace walked downstairs to begin her duties, broom in hand. But when she entered the hallway, she froze. Ethan was already sweeping. Not sloppily, not dramatically, just steadily, carefully. He didn't look up. He simply kept sweeping. "Grace, you don't have to do that, Ethan. I know," he continued, quietly. "Ethan, I want to." No explanation, no plea, no grand gesture, just service. Grace watched him, really watched him. His movements were humble, slow, thoughtful. The Ethan she once knew would never have touched a broom, not even to pretend. This was real. Something in her chest loosened. Not forgiveness yet, but its first breath. Scene 5. The bench by the garden. Later, while the sun dipped behind the magnolia trees, Grace stepped outside to the garden. She saw Ethan sitting on a bench, Bible open in his hands. He wasn't reading aloud. He wasn't trying to be seen. He was simply learning. She approached quietly, unsure why her feet carried her to him. "Grace, what are you reading?" Ethan looked up, surprised, not expecting her to speak first. "Ethan, the book of James. Faith without works is dead." He gave a small, self-aware smile. "Ethan, I've had a lot of faith in words. I think it's time my actions caught up." Grace sat down beside him. Not close, but not far either. The distance between them had changed. "Grace, I can see that." Their silence was peaceful, not filled with what was broken but what was slowly being rebuilt. The sun sank, and with it, the weight of yesterday. Closing scene. The new beginning. As night fell, Grace stood to leave but paused. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Warm, brief, honest. "Grace, thank you for trying." Ethan's breath caught not in triumph, but in reverence. Ethan softly, I'll keep trying. Not to earn your love, but to walk in truth. Grace nodded. Grace. One day at a time. They parted, but this time they walked in the same direction.